This year's China International Import Expo has concluded in Shanghai despite happening amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The expo was able to rake in over $70 billion in deals. How has the pandemic and the ongoing U.S.-China trade war shaped the event? And with China pinning its hope on a new economic policy, can the CIIE catalyze this process? To answer these questions, I'm joined by David Blair, Vice President and Senior Economist at the Center for China and Globalization in Beijing. And also we have Professor Gong, Professor of Economics at the University of International Business and Economics in studio with us. Welcome, gentlemen. Later on, we'll also be joined by Liang, Associate Professor of Economics at the Willamette University. Professor Gong, let me go to you first. Data from the event organizers show that deals worth more than $72 billion were signed at this year's expo. That is a 2% increase from that of last year. Considering the pandemic this year, how significant is this number?
Well, I think the fact that this event was even held was a significant development. We have a lot of reasons to cancel this. We take a lot of risks of hosting this event because of the ravaging COVID-19 pandemic, but we still take that risk. We still keep our wallet open. We try to buy things from the rest of the world. We try to help with people from the rest of the world. And we did this sort of in a meticulous way. We implemented all kinds of cautious measures to prevent the pandemic from happening again in my hometown in Shanghai. And I think pretty much we succeeded. So I think, even amid all kinds of difficulties, we still eked out a 2% increase over the last year's CIIE event. And that's a tall order, in my opinion. $72 billion, that's a lot of money. As I said previously, it adds up to close to 4% of Chinese imports last year in 2019. And the fact that we can achieve this amid this this very difficult economic environment for the whole world, that's a feast, in my opinion.
Right, David, what do you think? I mean, this is the first of its kind. A national government-sponsored import-themed expo anywhere in the world.
Yeah, well, it demonstrates two things in particular. One, it shows how big China's consumer market is. So these foreign firms that are showing their goods at the expo are showing how much they really want to get involved in this market. The other thing that it shows is that the government is welcoming them into this market. There have been a lot of steps over the last few years, especially this year, to continue opening up the market and to show that China's open for business, basically.
Right, Professor Gong, much has been made of the esports and pharmaceuticals at this year's CIIE. A lot of firms are from non-banking sectors, but other industries like the auto industry were also present, featuring smart mobility and sustainable technology. Did these technologies make any headway? I mean, how has the pandemic popularized certain sectors which were also featured at the CIIE?
Well, we're starting to see some structural changes introduced by the pandemic, actually. If there's any good side from this horrific event that has killed in the United States 220,000 people, actually more than that, and also I think about over 4,000 people here in China. If there's any good thing about coming far out of this, I think it's the introduction and acceptance by the mass market of these new technologies. I think more people are getting used to a online this, online that, and also these new technology developments in areas, for example, in automatic driving, autonomous driving, and other new technologies. It's actually getting easier to be accepted and penetrating into the market. That's probably a very good sign. I think the process of moving to that direction is greatly accelerated. So I'm a big believer in the theory that the Chinese market is particularly accommodating, acceptable to new innovations. Usually, when we look at in marketing field, they talk about Chinese market being quite a steep what's called an S-curve, penetration curve, meaning that Chinese consumers are more accommodating to mistakes, accommodating to new technologies. They're quite not so much conservative in accepting new things. So I think this is probably a very good thing that at least the economy is taking this opportunity to transition to a more digital direction, and I think this is a very good thing for China.
Right. Also, at this year's CIIE, the Bureau says that the number of financial institutions involved in the expo has doubled. So, David, let me ask you, what do you make of the fact that there has been more non-financial, non-banking institutions like, securities are featured here?
Just last October, Credit Suisse did their annual survey of wealth around the world, and they found that China now has more people in the top 10% of global wealth than the United States does. So this is a big market for wealth management. So naturally, all the big financial firms want to get in and be part of the wealth management industry here. I do want to raise a couple of red flags, though. First of all, the financial firms need to be strongly regulated by the local regulator. A lot of problems were caused in 2008 because there were a lot of gaps in international regulation, particularly with the AIG and its credit default swaps that it created. So the local regulator the Chinese regulators need to be very strong at regulating these international firms. And back to talk a little bit about the technology. The technology companies have made a lot of money off of this pandemic because they were able to step in and service a need that people had when they can't get out of their house. But we should be aware that a lot of small businesses around the country and many countries have gone out of business. Many people are suffering, and I don't think that's wholly a good thing. There's certainly an important role for small businesses in building communities and in offering jobs. Now, the tech sector in some ways is better about selling some things. For instance, here in China, all the competitive tech platforms offer competition for local businesses, and that's a good thing for consumers. And also, producers are able to use e-commerce to sell their goods. But we need to be wary about just believing wholeheartedly that tech taking over markets is going to be a completely good thing for society.
Professor Gong, do you have anything to add? What are your thoughts on this issue?
Well, I think David was talking about the online platforms, the encroaching share of the total retail sales in China being accounted for by these big platforms like Alibaba and JD.com. And I think this is a phenomenon very much like in the 1970s when Walmart was sweeping across the United States, killing mom and pop retail sales. And this is very much a similar kind of a revolution. I would be cautiously sort of objecting a little bit to David's argument. I mean, at the time in the 1970s, there was a lot of opposition towards Walmart's basically retail sales revolution movement. But looking back, I think Walmart did introduce a lot of efficiency in the retail market. It did, increase the productivity in that sector. Even though I totally admit that a lot of jobs are gone during those days, and I think we are seeing a digital replica of the kind of a Walmart revolution happening right here in China. So any sort of revolutionary technologies coming on the horizon will introduce two effects. One on the positive side, one on the negative side. There will be losers and winners on both sides. But I think as long as there is indeed a productivity gain, there is indeed convenience to the consumer markets, there's indeed some kind of a gain from trade as a result of this technology advancement, I think the economy will be doing fine. I mean, there will be jobs created in other sectors of the economy, and history never fails us in creating those jobs to replace the old jobs lost.
Yeah. All right. We understand that we have Professor Liang from Willamette University in the United States. Professor Liang, great to have you with us again. What do you make of the CIIE, the Import Expo held in Shanghai? What messages did you pick up from the exhibitors and also the leaders speaking at the event?
Thank you for having me on. So I think this is a great event. It, on the one hand, showcases that China's firm commitment to opening its market, to embracing globalization and multilateralism. And I think that it's very clearly from the speech from President Xi Jinping at the opening ceremony. And on the other hand, it brings real benefits to the exhibitors and also domestic and international buyers, as we heard from the new number that there are $71 billion worth of trade deal that has been inked at this event. So I think that's the real benefits from all over the world. In face of pandemic and economic slowdown, this definitely brings a lot of sort of economic boost to this much needed global economy.
Right, we have a lot of commentators and news pieces, interviewing people saying that the expo was largely symbolic. What would you say to those critics?
Well, first of all, I think the symbolic value does matter, right? I think when in the world there is this rising sentiment about protectionism, reverting back to domestic economy and unilateralism, I think it is important at the symbolic level that China is embracing globalization, multilateralism. And second of all, I think, like I said, there are actual contracts that have been signed. I know that there have been complaints from last year that only about half of the contracts are executed. But I think even if it's just half, right, that is still substantial amount. Not to mention, a lot of business connections, a lot of the new technology, new products that are showcased in the exhibit, and a lot of the collaborative, cooperative projects are being formed. So I think all these are substantive benefits. They're not just symbolic values.
My opinion is that it's hard to argue against the money. I mean, we're talking about $72 billion over 3 or 4 days. That's $20 billion a day. I mean, where can you get that kind of commerce, right, in today's environment? So, the kind of a criticism waged against this event, this is an event actually for foreign companies selling into the Chinese market. In my opinion, it's total nonsense.
Right, but Professor Liang, let's talk about U.S.-China business ties.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead. Professor
I
Liang,
just
go ahead.
wanted to add that yes, I agree with the I agree with the professor, right? That the fact that so many businesses are coming and they have been attending 3 times in a row this event, and I think that really demonstrated people are voting by foot.
All right, voting by foot. Hopefully, this will be a platform that benefits everybody. Thank you, David Blair, Vice President and Senior Economist at the Center for China and Globalization, Professor Gong at the University of International Business and Economics, and Professor Liang, Professor of Economics at Willamette University. Thank you all so very much.